Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dal, and Classic Cataclysm Beta is finally upon us, which means that the Classic Realms will soon be moving into the next timeline that follows Wrath of the Lich King. For many, Cataclysm was the very first foray into Azeroth, me included. Way back then I made my very first druid character on the server Scarlet Crusade, and the rest was history. Cataclysm marked a pretty major shift in design for World of Warcraft, taking its very first steps towards modernizing the game, for better or for worse, adding influential features and making massive changes that would shape the game towards what we know today as retail WoW. In today's video, I wanted to go over all of the major features that made Cataclysm really stand out from Wrath of the Lich King. For many of you that are still on the fence deciding whether you'll play Cata after Wrath or will skip out entirely, hopefully this video will give you some insight of what it was like and assist you in your decision making going forward. But right before that, most of you guys watching these kind of videos are still not subscribed. However, the more of you remind, the more of you do, so let's keep it going. Subscribe to the channel and ring the bell if you're watching these videos anyway, especially if you want to get more regular content regarding Dragonflight 10.2 or potentially some classic Cataclysm content. One of the very first things you'll notice going from Wrath to Cataclysm is just the number of class changes that came with that expansion. Cataclysm was responsible for adding a ton of new race class combinations, with dwarves getting access to 3 new playable options of mages, shamans, and warlocks. The Alliance faction also saw new additions such as the gnome priest, the human hunter, and the night elf mage. On the Horde side, we got Blood Elf warriors, Orc mages, Undead hunters, but also Tauren paladins as well as priests, as well as Troll warlocks and druids. The class of hunter now uses focus instead of mana as the primary combat resource. Focus is basically another form of energy, but it has a little bit more interactivity with some of the hunter's abilities. And the class of paladin got a builder-spender system of holy power, which works kinda like Rogue's combo points, where you build holy power and then spend it once you have enough of it. Mana is still a resource for most paladins, but it becomes a lot less limiting with all of your primary combat and gameplay mechanics now offset to this holy power system. But besides class changes, you'll also notice that the world of Azeroth has changed quite a bit with the expansion of Cataclysm, as Deathwing has ravaged so many of the original iconic zones, with places like Darkshore absolutely torn up with massive cyclones and whirlpools. Barrens got split into 2 separate zones entirely. You'll find Thousand Needles sunken completely underwater, and even Badlands is looking pretty beat up. Though within this destruction, you also do have new experiences in every single one of these zones, with new questlines, new storylines, and new ways to interact with the environments themselves. You even get a pretty awesome questline in the Badlands specifically, where a dwarf tells you a tale of how he punched Deathwing right in the face, which is one of the most memorable questlines they've ever created. And with this massive world revamp for us to explore, we now have the ability to fly in all the original zones of Azeroth, where previously this was only available for newer expansions such as TBC or Wrath of the Lich King. But with Cataclysm, flying is now available everywhere else, including some of the new leveling zones added for the 81 to 85 level brackets. This did mean that certain zones and areas had to be reworked a little, since now you can access so much more of the game just by flying to there directly. This included the 2 capital cities of either faction, Orgrimmar as well as Stormwind. During Cataclysm, flying was definitely a very polarizing feature, because it made the world big but also small at the very same time. On one hand, you could now fly everywhere you want to. The zones felt so much more connected than ever before because now you can fly in between zones to really get the scale of the world. And the vertical exploration they added for some of the newer Cataclysm zones was also a nice touch. But on the other hand, you no longer struggled to get around the world like you used to. This massive scale of Azeroth has been kind of minimized, since now you can just fly over every obstacle. Mountains no longer feel nearly as big because they no longer block your progression, as they used to separate out all of the zones and will make each track a journey of its own. And the time spent traveling in between zones really did make you feel that the world is massive. For many, during Cataclysm, the world felt so much smaller than ever before, which was on one hand a nice convenience that you can now fly everywhere, but on the other hand it sacrificed that experience that classic WoW was able to create. Another feature that was added during Cataclysm was guild perks, which, as it says on the tin, As you level up a guild, your guild gains perks, which provide you with a bunch of bonuses. Most of them ended up being quality of life improvements that never really affected combat or endgame progression, and generally encouraged players to be part of a guild, even if it was just a social guild to hang out in. To level up a guild and unlock perks, you had to participate in guild activities. This activity list included things like killing raid bosses or dungeon bosses as an 80% guild group, or doing RBGs or winning arenas, completing quests and even daily quests, but also completing guild challenges, which were weekly endgame activities that you could complete in order to gain additional bonuses. Most perks were simple quality of life updates that we see in current retail WoW, with things like faster mount speeds, faster Hearthstone cooldown, faster movement while dead, instant mail, as well as mobile banking, which are still present to this day. But the original launch of Cataclysm had so many other abilities as well, such as Have Group Will Travel, which was a way for you to summon everybody in your party or raid to your location. An incredibly good ability that helps spark so many cross-faction invasions and combat encounters if you played on a PvP server. But we also had a bunch of other bonuses such as additional experience gains, faster reputation grinds, reduced durability loss, more honor earned, faster flight pass, and even better vendor prices. Then we had the perk of cash flow, which is what turned guilds from an organized raiding environment or a friend group into a social cesspool. It became very lucrative to spam out invites to all players on your realm, especially for lower players currently leveling. Because with that perk, every time they killed and looted mobs while questing, a portion of that profit would also be added into the guild's coffers. And for newer players or players leveling alt in Cataclysm, this created an awful experience because you couldn't go 2 seconds without someone always trying to snipe you with a guild invite. So for fresh new players, the first experience with guilds was those cesspool guilds that are just spam inviting as many players as possible. And they don't really get the chance to have a proper, wholesome introduction to the game with a community, whether a social one or one that's looking to raid. You don't necessarily have veteran players that are there to help you learn how to play your class or explain your game mechanics or how to queue into a dungeon or anything like that. I mean, the guild perks can be kind of useful, but at the end of the day, I don't think anyone would want a new player to have that kind of a terrible first impression of what guilds are when it's the first time playing World of Warcraft. Because of this reason specifically, perks will likely see some kind of a revamp during Cataclysm Classic updates. Up next, we have Reforging, which was a unique feature which would allow players to change or transform their equipment. Reforging allowed you to adjust any piece of gear or weapon, changing its stats slightly by taking a portion of a secondary stat and reallocating that portion into another stat entirely. This was primarily useful when trying to gain additional stats such as hit rating or expertise, which were required to make sure that you aren't missing any of your spellcasts or weapon hits, as missing those would result in massive damage losses. Tanks could gain even more defensive stats, such as parry or dodge rating, which was required for some tanks to hit their avoidance caps. You could also adjust items to gain additional spirit, haste, critical strike, and mastery rating to really optimize your stats in any way you saw fit, which is great for many of the min-maxers at the time. Together with Reforging, we also see the return of transmogs, where Reforging changes the stats on your gear, which has an impact during gameplay. Transmogs simply adjust the appearance of your currently equipped gear to resemble other items entirely. This in turn created its own minigame within WoW, where completionists would go out and do older outdoor quest content, dungeons, raids, or PvP to obtain their perfect transmog set, and to expand their visual armory collection, providing players with new ways to express their characters or show off some of the more rare items they might have obtained from older expansions. Cataclysm was also the expansion that introduced the Dungeon Journal. The journal would contain various information of many of the Cataclysm's boss encounters, detailing some of the abilities they would use, the phases of the encounter, as well as some of the loot that these bosses can drop. This was the first of many efforts made to provide more information to the player in-game, where previously we all had to rely on external websites and add-ons to research boss fights and find out what gear we needed to complete our business slot armory set. But now, all of this information can be easily found in your dungeon journal, so theoretically, you can now read up on what the boss does before you pull it. Though ask anybody that actually played in Cataclysm, nobody ever read the dungeon journal, which led to a lot of dungeon wipes pretty early into the expansion. However, I do wonder if more people will find it useful now that Cataclysm is getting a re-release version years down the line. And for those of you that enjoyed PvP content, you'll be happy to know that Cataclysm was the expansion that introduced rated battlegrounds, with random battlegrounds becoming more of a casual mode in Cataclysm. But if you really wanted to grind out your rating and some conquest gear, you could always form up a 10-man party for RBGs to run in a more competitive version of Warsong Gulch and Eye of the Storm. The early version of RBGs was a lot of fun back in the day. For some that didn't really vibe with the whole arena format, but instead wanted to play more objective and big group focus, RBGs was the best place you could go to gain gear as well as obtain some of the better PvP rewards. For others, it was the perfect playground to dominate while playing unusual compositions. Like the one time a 10-man old Disc Breeze group would run around in RBGs, capturing objectives, healing one another, while nuking down one player at a time with a barrage of well-coordinated penances, one-shotting everybody they came across. And that's going to be the full list of some of the major influential features that launch with the original Cataclysm WoW. However, this version of Cataclysm is probably going to go through quite a lot of changes, as we'll see additional updates over on the Cataclysm beta over the next few weeks and months. If you're currently a fan of Wrath Classic version of World of Warcraft, what are your thoughts on Cataclysm Classic? Is it something you're interested in, or do you want to give it a little bit more time and see what kind of changes it'll have on the beta before you make your final decision, or are you just not interested in it in the slightest? Let me know all your thoughts in the comments down below. As per usual, if you guys enjoyed this video or found it informative, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. I would very much appreciate it. And as always, in the description of every single video and live stream, we have a link to our Discord community channel. Probably the best place to reach out to me directly in case you want to let me know what you thought about this video or hang out with the rest of the community to discuss some of the upcoming changes. Join our Discord to become part of the community. But otherwise, thank you all so much for watching this video. I do hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know all of your thoughts down below. And as always, I'll see all of you guys in another video.